I think we're good to go. Yes? Okay, cool. All right. Make sure I stay on track. Just to make sure that everybody stays awake, we're gonna sugar load you up. So during the conference, we're gonna be throwing out candies. Because I'm in information security, I don't play a lot of sports, so if I throw something at you, don't take it personal. All right, so thank you, Louisville ISSA, for having us for your information security conference. What is this, your 16th year? 16? Woohoo, yay. Everybody seems so excited after lunch. All right, so legal disclaimer. Today we're going to talk about ransomware recovery. More specifically, there have been a number of organizations that have allowed me to share their information in hopes that you can either prevent ransomware attacks from occurring or increase your security posture. How many of you are familiar with ransomware or have lived that experience? It's a great experience, isn't it? I haven't lived it yet. I've just heard it. Oh, you've heard of it? Oh. You live vicariously. All right. So while I'll try the best not to name some of them, you may identify as we have clients all over the U.S. A little bit about myself. I've been in the industry now for 30 years to the point where I've come to the conclusion that the grass is brown everywhere. So with that, we'll go ahead and kick right in. So a little bit about myself. My name is McCabe. Again, I've been doing this for about 30 years now. I am a prior sailor, believe it or not. Any other veterans in the room? What branch? Army. Army? Ooh, bubblehead. You are a target for us. I was a surface warfare.
Well, there's only two kinds of ships, right?
Yeah, ships and then targets. Oh. So who else do we have in the room? Surface Navy? Yeah. All right. Any Marines? Oh, one. Paul. Good deal. So I've worked with companies ranging from Fortune 500s to small, medium-sized businesses to startups. Worked with state, federal government agencies as well as foreign governments. I am a speaker. Oh, Adrian's giggling. That's a bad sign.
Oh, you're moving out the can.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Do you want me to stay in one place? I can't stay in one place. I've had so much coffee this morning. Okay. I am a hacker, which means I have to ask and get the answer to the question of why, how, what things do. I'm also an instructor with ISACA, one of the organizations here. A little bit about the company, what we do. We work in audit and insurance, cyber acquisition, due diligence. So if you're acquiring a company, they fill out that form that says they're doing all the right things. We actually get to ground on whether or not they're actually doing them. Incident response management. One of the passions that I have is helping organizations when they're in their time of crisis. In this case, we're going to talk specifically around ransomware. Information security and risk advisory services, regulatory compliance, because we're not regulated enough in our industries, right? Training and education, where I have the distinct, unique privilege. We are Central Ohio's and most of the Ohio River Valley's only accredited training organization that has instructors across the core 4 certifications around governance of enterprise IT, information security management, information systems audit, and risk and information system control, as well as the governance framework at COBIT, and soon, next year, hopefully, the Cybersecurity Nexus platform, CSX, as well as doing vulnerability assessments and pen testing. So that's the adult version of me. I travel way too much. This came up in my stats this week for this year's travel, so it's a little off on the number of cities. I like to have fun when I travel, much to the chagrin of most of hotel management, because I'll leave this when I leave a hotel, and then I will get a phone call. Mr. McCabe, the couple that came into your room afterwards did not appreciate the message you left on the mirror. For those of you who are interested, these are the companies that actually have a sense of humor. The ones with red X's do not. Full disclosure, I am a Hilton Honors member now. So as you probably guessed a little bit about myself, I am filled with snarkiness. I'm in information security. For those of you who can't see, I will go to Starbucks and I will order and give them that name, which is hours of entertainment. Nothing like being in a Starbucks where you have somebody call out Marco and watch the crowd respond with bingo. See, you guys have a sense of humor. I'm really jaded because of math. This is the number of data breaches that we've incurred. Thank you, Yahoo, for putting us over the billion mark. I'm somewhat controversial because I will tweet images like this about compliance, followed up with that. I had somebody actually stop me and they're like, you traumatized my child. I was like, why is your child following me on Twitter? Well, let's get to the actual problem. And yes, it's true, I'm not right on any level. This is my normal work attire. Oh, I am a geek. I am wearing my Boba Fett socks today, too. Any other science fiction geeks in a room? Really, only one person admits? 2, 3? Okay. It's a safe space here. We can admit to being sci-fi geeks. So what we're going to talk about today, we'll talk about malicious software. Specifically, we'll get into the area of the history of ransomware, where it came from, and where we're at today. How old do you think ransomware is? Oh, who said that? What kind of chocolate do you like? Okay. Nicholas, do you have? Oh, okay. No. We'll let you pick. I got it. Get to pick your chocolate. They didn't tell you this was going to be an interactive talk, did they? Hershey's. From doctors to criminals. So going back to 2005, which is sort of a misleading statement, because back in 1989 was the first case of ransomware, where the person who was holding it was a former doctor who had gotten frustrated, and he demanded ransom for the recovery of your systems. Now, where he might have went wrong at is you had to send payment to a post office box. Might that pose an issue if you're a criminal? Again, he was a doctor, not a criminal. All the way through, coming up to, how many of you remember this? WannaCry. WannaCry, is that a good thing, bad thing? Good, bad? It's your state of mind every day. You're in information security longer than I have, right? I used to be happy. So this was an unprecedented attack because of the fact of all the individuals that were impacted, but there was something else that was a little bit problematic. How did WannaCry propagate? Anybody remember? Well, we're going to get into that. This was within the first 24 hours of WannaCry being released and identified in the wild. Over 200,000 plus organizations were impacted, some very large ones. Anybody remember what day this happened? Mother's Day. My mother called me to ask me about this. Not the call that I was expecting, because my mother is not in information systems or IT. She actually sells furniture for a living. So when my mother calls me about something like this, I know it's going to be big. How many of you get calls from your mother saying, hey, what's this new virus that I'm hearing about? Well, one of the reasons why it was so impactful was because, if anybody remembers, it used a nation-state exploit. Actually, it used 2 of them. Eternal Blue and Double Pulsar. Now, Eternal Blue is the one that got a lot of recognition. However, the way it propagated was using SMB, small message blocks, protocol. Well, how is it that SMB protocol impacted all these organizations? Anybody want to guess? It was exposed. Because what could go wrong with having Windows file shares exposed to the internet? It was then used to deliver the payload, which in this case was the actual ransomware. The scourge of our existence. Which brings us to a unique point. If a nation state's cyber arsenal gets leaked to the internet, What do you think we should do? We should patch. Patch now. These are not your common run-of-the-mill exploits. These were designed for the purpose of exploiting other nation states. What was interesting was Microsoft, prior to this being launched, Microsoft made the patch available. Which brings us to our timeline. 1710 was released. Microsoft put it out. This is the actual timeline. From there, of course, our conference required hacker. You know, the guy who can hack into your network one-handed but can't buy a chair. They started working on this. They started researching and finding out what was going on. Now, during that time, of course, business as usual for IT, right? We're just going to hang out. We're not going to patch. We're trying to explain to the business why we need to patch, but it's, you know, just like every other patch. No, this was a little bit different. Then we had the shadow brokers dump, which released the tool. It actually released a number of tools, some of which we're still dealing with today. Bad guys got an early Christmas gift, way back when. And then we had WannaCry, or what I call the dumpster fire of things. And this cycle continues on. We're still seeing organizations, and we've seen organizations post-WannaCry that are still facing these issues, that still have these vulnerabilities that can be exploited. I love this one. So this is from the Ponemon Institute. It's a little bit dated, from 2016. 56% admit not ready for a ransomware attack. 38 stated that they have a strategy. What is the only viable strategy for ransomware? Confirmed backups, right? Now, for those of you who are math elites like me, you'll notice that these two numbers don't equal 100, which led me to an interesting thing, that the remaining 6% could not respond because of an ongoing ransomware attack. So that's important to keep in mind. So when we talk about the traditional attacks, why ransomware is effective versus traditional attacks, well, it's because when an adversary attacks, they leave a trail behind. They have to invest a lot of time and effort. They're going to potentially leave behind tools. They're going to need additional resources. Maybe they have somebody that's great at exploit development in a specific language, but not necessarily the one they're proficient in, so they have to outsource development. It's a nightmare. Requires a larger investment. The potential for getting caught. How long do I have until I sell that information before it's no good? So let's shift the dynamic. For an attacker, ransomware is a no-brainer. It's a low barrier of entry. Doesn't take a lot of effort to develop this. In fact, in hindsight, when we look at a number of the ransomware attacks that occurred, you know, it was not uncommon for the first couple of generations, they were only asking for a couple $100 in ransomware. Why is that? They're waiting for the larger target. And we're going to see the increase on this. You know, when we talk about Bitcoin, you know, I remember years ago working with a very large financial institution. They're like, oh, we'll never get on board with Bitcoin. It's magic. There's no way around it. Well, when you have a criminal syndicate that's holding your data for ransom, and the only way you can pay is Bitcoin, guess what? They just created their own market for cryptocurrency. When we look at getting into launching a ransomware attack, just like everything else, it's as a service. Now, you can't go to Amazon Prime yet and ask for a ransomware attack, but maybe. Again, the rise of cryptocurrency. So why is this so lucrative? Well, in as little of a month, you can actually develop a valid ransomware attack. Say that only costs us $32,000. We're going to host it on disposable infrastructure because cloud is a great thing, right? Any cloud vendors in the room? I'm not using your infrastructure for this, I promise. Launching the attack, running a help desk. We're going to run that 24 hours a day, 10 days. We're going to pay our staff $150. Total cost to launch the attack, $56.5. Now, if we get 1% of 1 million at $300 a system, we can net 2.9 million on an ROI, which begs the question, why are we here and not out writing ransomware? I have to question that every single day. And as it turns out, it's because I do not look good in orange. So I'm not going to tempt that fate. What about from the business side? Why is ransomware a major concern? You know, we like to say, well, if our employees would stop clicking things. And we know that's not going to happen because we've become accustomed to using things like email and clicking on links as a part of our job. And if I send your accounts payable a malicious link or a malicious document that says account past due or account overdue, what is your accounts payable going to do? They're going to click it. Why are they going to click it though, Lisa?
Because it just makes them feel like they're something wrong, that they need to click on it right away.
It will go even easier than that. It's their job. And if we know what their individual's job is, then we can get them to do what we want as an adversary. Plus, we know that users are only doing their job, so they're going to try and find ways around if we put in kludgy controls, which we all know when we implement information security controls, they are seamless to the end user, right? So they'll find ways around it. When I was active duty, I was working with the Marines, and one of the things that we had done was we rolled out these new things called web proxies that would prevent a website talking with an endpoint system from directly communicating. We thought we'd see a decrease in the amount of malicious software that was getting in, except for we didn't think the control all the way through, and there are some smart Marines, no matter what you hear, they figured out that they could use other proxies because we didn't set down the permissions properly to restrict who could filter the proxies. So they were bypassing our proxies right out to the internet. Users will find a way to do their job, and at the end of the day, that's all they want to do is do their job and watch cat videos. From a business perspective, though, we have a bigger problem. Do we know who has access to your data, even within your business? When do they access that data? Is it restricted to business hours? Or is it that they're logging in 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. to access that data? Can they access that data? Here's a big question. Why do they have access to that data? I don't know how many times I've seen organizations where you have somebody that starts off. How many of you are in the same position now with the organization you're with now that you originally started from? No. Most of us make lateral transitions. We move within the organization. But does IT necessarily revoke our permissions? They should, but they don't. Usually especially if we're doing a lateral transition from one department to another, usually the two managers will make a drug deal with each other and say, hey, we need this individual to stay on this project for at least 3 more months, and then they keep your permissions in place so you can support that project. Has that ever happened to anybody? Happens quite frequently, right? But then 3 months comes and goes, you're off that project, but do your permissions go away? No, and you move from one department to the next, and guess what happens? You get overprivileged. What's really interesting is when we see organizations that go that route of trying to clean up, what gets really interesting when we start saying we're going to take permissions away, people take it personally. What did I do wrong? Nothing. You don't need it. Why do you want something you don't need access to? Where can they access it from? Do you have to be on campus and on-prem? Or can you remote in? maybe it may not be a good idea for your R&D staff to be able to remote access your data. Because what could possibly go wrong there, right? Again, is it required for them to do their job? Do we know? How many of you have role-based defined access controls within your organization? We've got about a room of 100, and I saw maybe 6, 7 hands go up. When it comes to ransomware, the ransomware will get the same permissions as any user it infects. Which means, cool, anything that that user can touch during day-to-day, so can the ransomware. You have to assume that they have the same permissions. This is why solutions like role-based access controls are very important. Only give access to what is absolutely needed. When it comes to paying a ransom, if you get hit, what are the pros and cons? Well, one pro is you can potentially restore if you pay. But this begs the question, do you have a business continuity plan and disaster recovery capability? And more importantly, is it truthful? Does your BCP and DR take into account a ransomware attack? And have you tested it? Do you know with certainty you can get your data back? How many of you have BCP and DR plans that have like that 1/4 inch of dust on the binder? You don't have to raise your hand. A lot of organizations do. Some folks look at it as being the cheaper alternative compared to the value of the data. Can you live without that data that's being held hostage? Maybe, maybe not. Back to business as usual once you pay the ransom. Yeah, that's the same position that got you to where you're at present. On the con side of the house, it does promote criminal activity. Are you sponsoring somebody like ISIS or DPKR? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe it's just Cousin Yuri over in Kiev that you're sponsoring. That makes you feel better, right? Talk about potential file corruption. Just because you pay does not mean necessarily that your data is going to be recovered, as we'll cover later on. And keep in mind, you're dealing with a criminal organization or an adversary. They infected you once. So when they send you that self-extracting key method to decrypt your data, what else are they putting on your systems? Or do you even know? Now, it may sound like a no-brainer. Hey, we'll pay $17,000 and that because security professionals are expensive. Just pay the ransom? Unfortunately, there's a big but here. Things you need to consider. How many of you heard about the Hollywood Presbyterian attack? This was classic. They got hit with ransomware. They got the note for $300 per computer system. How many of you deal with incident response on a regular basis? Do you ever want to poke the bear? So their IT administrator who got the ransom reached back out to the adversary and said, do you have an idea who we are? Our lawyers are going to sue you. At which point the ransom then went become multi-millions because now you just announced who you are. Highly recommend if you get hit with ransomware, do not email them from your account. Use a proxy service. Try to coordinate, make it look less than it is. Hopefully they fall into the same issues that we have, that they can't do proper threat intelligence to identify where it's coming from. But they spike the cost of the ransomware exponentially. Niana out of South Korea, they got hit. They tried to bargain with their ransom or for the recovery of the keys. In fact, they worked out a payment plan. They were going to pay them four $250,000 payments on the agreement that when they hit the third payment, they would get the decryption keys. Spoiler alert, they paid all 3 payments, and guess what they didn't get? Because $750,000 is still better than $1 million, right? Criminals may not be trustworthy, I've heard. Just wondering. The Ottawa hospital that got hit with ransomware, this was brilliant. They were actually prepared. They had practiced. They ran it consistently. They got hit on a Friday, because as it turns out, when do adversaries like to attack? Fridays and holidays. They know the operations are running smooth. However, they had their stuff together, and they were able to fully re-image those systems with a minimal impact. Now, going back to Hollywood Presbyterian, how could this happen? We're talking about a hospital that falls under HIPAA requirements, which require backup plan and disaster recovery. So when we see cases like this occur, and we all saw like the cases in Atlanta and in Florida and Maryland, that these organizations got hit with ransomware, but they couldn't recover, and they made the news because it had been going on for so long. So when you see events like this, you have to ask the question, well, where were their DR capabilities at? Not where they thought they were. Not where they thought they were. And unfortunately, there is no Yelp review for ransomware criminal organizations that you can go in and say, hey, these were really great people to work with. Versus, you know, it took 24 to 48 or 48 to 72 hours for them to respond. Now, this doesn't happen. When you get hit, are you ready? When we talk about cryptocurrency, how many of you enjoy working with procurement? Could you imagine going to your procurement department and asking them for them to invest in this ethereal cryptocurrency? What are they going to do to you? What are they going to ask? I want to spend $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 on cryptocurrency. How many of your procurement departments are ready for that? What's that?
I said they're going to say, give me a GSA contract number.
Which we all know, most cases, ransomware, that clock is ticking, right? That sense of urgency. And every time that clock hits a certain level, the price goes up. You know, is it easy to get cryptocurrency? In a best case, if you're working with somebody that already has an established Bitcoin wallet or a cryptocurrency wallet, they can make the payment. But they want to be remunerated and repaid as well. Again, how are you going to get your procurement department to sign off on it? What are the legal implications? You pay this ransom, you're sponsoring ISIS, are you okay with that? How does that potentially look? What happens with your taxes? We know that the cryptocurrency market is highly volatile. It could be worth a couple thousand today, and in the span of a couple of hours, the price increases or drops dramatically. Can you travel with it? Coming into or out of the US, you have to declare any income or any financials that you have over $10,000. Funny story, TSA stopped me because they saw Bitcoin on my laptop. Really wasn't Bitcoin. But that's a story for another time. Let's just say me and TSA are not like this. So let's get into some case studies.
Before we take off, please be sure your seat backs are in the upright and long position. Your turntable is
So let's see if you can figure out what happens here. This is an aircraft manufacturer. What do we think this is? Phishing. What do we have here? Hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil. 1359 and 10%. Let's break it down. So really what happened was, yes, they opened a phishing email attack. The individual who opened it did not notice that it was malicious and, as a result, did not report it. The ransomware ran for over 14 hours, resulting in 90% of their network systems being encrypted. 90%. Locked out. Business was at a standstill. So what we call the makings of a perfect storm was their environment. Overprivileged users, lack of segmentation, and unconditional trust. We trust our employees to do the right things, right? It's not really the employees I'm worried about, it's somebody tricking them into doing something. The secretary is the one who received the phishing email. And they had promoted her to being the senior administrative assistant. IT mistakenly put her into the domain admin group because they thought it was the domain for the administrative staff. Simple mistake that they made. As it turns out, domain admins tend to have a very wide reach, don't they? Lack of segmentation, secretary's account permissions allowed her to get everywhere within the organization. So when we rolled on site, what we discovered was, of course, as you can imagine, with 90% of the network impacted, all these capabilities were no longer there. The only department that wasn't hit was the engineering department, because when they got hit, they had not brought the engineering department online yet. They had just finished a uplift and had not physically connected them back to the network. Not a good day. We asked about your backups, and they said, yes, we have backups. And it was like, cool, this will be in and out. And they're like, yes, we test these on a regular basis. The grass is brown. Guess who else had access? Those backups? Yeah, they had them. The backups were encrypted as well. So again, they were very eco-friendly to ransomware propagating within their organization. No log retention, no net flow, no packet. Executives did not want IT upsetting the users because they were pulling permissions, even though they recommended it. They're now logging. They're capturing net flow with a rolling 48 of PCAP. As it turns out, when it comes to upsetting users versus the ability to generate revenue, guess where senior management goes? They're putting in the appropriate security policies in place. They're training their staff. They're enforcing them. They've run since we've worked with them, 2 unannounced IRs where they simulated ransomware attacks again. Again, this client ended up paying the ransom to get their data back, even though we told them, you may not get it back. They were lucky. Again, this was only $25,000 plus their downtime, which they did not disclose to us for our final report. But it should never have happened. County government case that we worked. Why would you target a county, a municipality, a small government organization? What's that? They don't have the staff. It's low-hanging fruit for an attacker. And we know that in most cases, yes, the counties will pay. In fact, we're seeing a lot more organizations, municipalities that are getting hit that are turning to their insurance companies. So I'm wondering how long that's going to take before the insurance companies go, that's not our job. In this case, again, this was after the WannaCry attack, but they allowed SMBs, SIFs to be exposed to the internet. What do you think happened? It was a fire. When we started rolling through with them, talking with them, we're like, what about your logs? And they looked at us and they're like, that costs money. We don't want to store logs. Their logs were gone, which makes it very difficult to do forensics, by the way. We asked them about their network. Flat network syndrome. You could see the end of the internet and you would fall off. Right? How many of us have flat networks? Don't raise your hand because because I'd guess that 99.9% of us do. When we asked them about capability for NetFlow and packet capture, it was like asking them to go find unicorns and cage them up. They had no concept. Now, this was a municipality, county government. Again, attack through SMB CIFs, no centralized logging, flat network, PCI or packet capture and NetFlow was too hard. Lateral movement, yes, we could see this even after we were on site. We could see the attacker still moving within the environment and propagating. We identified 343 systems out of how many? Well, we didn't know because they didn't have an asset inventory. In fact, 100 of these systems were discovered only because of the ransomware attack. So to give you an idea of the timeline, we see going back from what we were able to see, started playing whack-a-mole. So initially, fire department and sheriff's department were hit. Then the county jail and water utility plant were hit. The passport office and voter registration. County courthouse, DA's office. The tax assessor and the animal shelter were the last two to get hit. The problem with playing whack-a-mole, they tried doing this themselves to try and clean up because their IT manager knew security. They didn't. It created a problem, and that problem was they stomped on everything, which led us to having these types of impacts. People who were supposed to be released from jail could not. The sheriff's department, their call system, which was supposed to be theoretically removed from the system and not on the same network, guess where it was? On the same network. Passports, water treatment facility, firefighting, courthouse, voter reg, tax assessor. And again, this is the same day that we got hit, or we got called, was when it hit that last day with the tax assessor, but I like to try to find goodness, so I think the actual reason they called us was because of this. I think this is why they called us. Their pound could not let animals go to people, which, that at least the brighter side of things, that's why I think they called us. Again, when we talk about some of the issues that they had, firewall review, we're doing that now. Log retention, they're outsourcing that to a third party. They're re-architecting their network, which is sad that we have to take that level of effort to do this. Again, a lot of this is being outsourced to a third party. Again, totally unprepared for the incident that occurred. 60% of the business critical systems that they had were able to be recovered. About 100 systems that were being ransomed, IT did not know about, and guess what? They weren't able to recover that data. This one was a cheap one, only 180,000. Again, could have been avoided. Could have been avoided had we been doing the basics. Healthcare providers, because we know that when we go to a hospital, we're not there for just our sheer enjoyment, right? Usually it's because there's an issue. These folks were working hard at a breach and a ransomware event. Overprivileged users, data was everywhere in their environment. They had no defined boundaries anywhere. We couldn't identify where data was supposed to be and where it had been moved by the adversaries prior to encrypting it. They had roughly 250 employees. 4 were IT. Their CIO, Chief Technology Officer, and then 2 people on the help desk. I think they may have priority issues. They use the same local password on over 400 systems. Because what could possibly go wrong? No information security staff. They were dealing with very public breach as well as part of the ransomware attack. Again, email came in to one of their nurses, who then took that email, forwarded it on to doctor number 1, who wanted to share the love, so he sent it to doctor number 2, who sent it to doctor number 3, who then sent it to their IT admin, but also doctor number 2 sent it to the help desk, again, not security trained, who then turned around and sent it to the CIO. Now, we're talking about ransomware hitting a healthcare provider, as well as others. Keeping in mind, data is everywhere in their environment. This adversary went to town with them. CIO, as it turned out, had access to all of these. Admin had access to all of these. Employee records, old patient information, the cloud drive where they were storing stuff that was not authorized by the organization. The admin was just trying to find additional space because IT told her they had run out of space on their storage device. Oh, this Google thing's free, so I'll just put it up there. We took this picture, and this is, I kid you not, from the client site. Notice that they put a chain, 2 chains, and countersunk it into the ground to secure their picnic table. Someone gave more thought to protecting a picnic table than their customer or their consumer information, their patient's information. Fast forward to the end of that. This one went over 1 million. And again, could have been avoided. Construction company, because as it turns out, criminal adversaries are not discriminatory when it comes to who they attack. They will attack anybody in order to ferret out money. Why would you attack them? Anybody in here a fan of the Wu-Tang Clan? A couple, yeah. Cream, right? What does CREAM stand for? Cash rules everything around me. Wow, are we in a post-lunch coma now? Okay, Nicholas, start getting candy and sugar out to the folks. I'd mentioned earlier, the organization when you're working with. While we were in the course of doing the investigation, they were reading the message that was left behind. Their general counsel, against our wishes, we told them, do not reach out to them. If you want to communicate with them, communicate through us. Their general counsel sent out an email. Dear sirs, we understand that you're presently requiring to pay $200,000 to receive the file keys. They offered, because of financial capabilities, they only offered $20,000 in 2 $10,000 payments. And people, this has never happened to me before in my life because they responded, the adversary responded. Conversation with the CFO exceeds their capabilities. They wanted $200,000. They offered them 20 and 2 easy $10,000 payments. We found out about this and we were waiting for it to come. The adversaries responded back. Todd, after much internal discussion, we recommend you fire your CFO and pay the requested amount. And then sent them a screenshot of their general ledger. The adversary had been in their network for some time and had identified exactly which systems to target and go after. They brute forced their RDP session, which to the company's account, they thought they were doing securely because they put it on a different port than the normal for security purposes. No centralized logging. Again, flat network. Packet capture, not a thing. Lateral movement, much. 43 servers, 200 workstations in total at the headquarters, and 19 active sites. They ended up paying a company $200,000 to broker the transaction to recover their data and recover their data off systems so that way they wouldn't get infected by anything else. Again, $250,000 spent to recover from ransomware. Guess who wasn't getting a bonus that year?
their strategy? Did they hire more people? Did they do anything different? At the end of the day, did they really do anything different?
They started making changes. They started. By the time the IR is done, I step out. Incident response is fun for the first couple of years, but after seeing the same problem over and over at different organizations, you can burn out, as did I. So, private school, again, we have the trifecta of evil: overprivileged users, lack of segmentation, and weak credentials. Again, this was another brute force attack, so the adversary is actually logging into the systems after they've compromised it. They had minimal logs we were able to reconstruct, but they don't have 24/7 monitoring to alert them that this was going on. Surprise, surprise, flat network. No packet capture. We did identify lateral movement, but we could pick up that they had targeted those specific systems on purpose. They went after 5 total servers, 3.2 terabytes of data in total. Again, we were able to reconstruct that they'd been in the network 48 hours before they sent the attack, or they initiated the attack. So once they gained access to the systems, they spent 2 days looking around before they actually launched the attack. Now, I know what you're all saying. Ed, this is a downer. Well, the impact was basically this. They actually had tested and validated their data recovery. And as a result, once the attack occurred, they were able to recover, again, another Friday night case, so IT was a little upset, but IT was able to recover and get the school back up and operational by Monday morning. And that's where we should be. Minimal data loss, less than $5,000 to respond. They're re-engineering the remote access because multi-factor is a thing, as it turns out. They're increasing their logging and outsourcing the monitoring capability. Again, they had the proper planning in place that prevented a major incident. Are we at the same level? So how can we recover from ransomware? How can we recover? Well, one is develop your program so you're trained for ransomware. Do you know what to do? Does your staff know what to do? Do they know how to report? Or is your organization like some that look at it from the aspect of, well, that's somebody else's job, so I'm not going to do it? How many of you now include ransomware activities and attacks as part of your business continuity plan? Nobody? What business continuity plan? Do we have that factored in? Getting into areas like network packet capture, with the case of the county attack that I shared, one of the things I didn't share was they had started power cycling systems. One of the systems they had left unattended. We were able to go into the memory and recover the decryption key, and that's how we started recovering some of those files. Not all of them, but some of them. How many of you have the capability to do host forensics? Memory forensics? Do you work with the folks in these cases? And if not, why not? Again, network segmentation can address a lot of this. For those of you who are interested, understanding the different areas. Restrict user permissions. If an individual doesn't need the permissions in order to do their job, take them away. Continuous monitoring. Understand what good is on your network so you can identify bad. Make sure that your backup, recovery, and storage solutions that you have will meet the need in light of adversity, in light of a ransomware attack. Mature your ransomware program. Network segmentation is a big start. That's a Herculean effort. It's the equivalent of saying we're going to move the building 6 inches to the left because you're going to break things, but it needs to be done. Otherwise, we run the risk of not being able to recover. Mature your programs. So 5 steps that you can take away right now when you go back to your business. Prevent this. Volume shadow copies. We're seeing a lot of the ransomware. We'll disable it and delete it. Make sure it's enabled. Remove your users from the local admin groups. Make sure they don't have the ability to install things on their own, either intentionally or unintentionally. Limit the number of shares that users have right access to. We like to put out file shares so that way it makes life easier so we can put documents there and upload spreadsheets, but do they actually need to have access to it? Use hidden file shares. Don't broadcast them. Don't let them out. And then only teach your users to only map to file shares as they need them. If the ransomware can't access that share, it's not going to encrypt it. And ransomware is becoming more and more prevalent. We're seeing advances in the attack methods where it used to be sent out through a malicious document or a link. We're now seeing adversaries going to the next step where they're breaking in before they launch it. This can impact your organization. We can reduce the impact. We don't have to be the victim. If you have proper backups that are tested and validated, you can recover. Yes, it's still going to cost, but it's not going to cost as much. And if for nothing else, do it for him. All right. That is the talk for the day. Thank you for joining. Hopefully you get a little bit more active as the day goes on. Any questions? No questions? Wow, this is easy. So we're seeing organizations, especially the ones that have large flat networks, like most organizations, they're putting them on their perimeter devices. So firewalls on the backside of the firewalls to see ingress and egress. And they're using it to identify any known malicious or C2 type of activity. So they're building out at the same time that they're battling ransomware, they're trying to develop their threat intel capability to identify, is this, why are we going out to this website? Why are we going out on these ports? And identifying it before it becomes an issue. Any other questions?